You want me to move over this way?
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yep.
Am I good here? All right. Well, we're going to get started. So tonight we're talking about the 6 superfoods for spring health. I'll get a few more foods that we'll talk about too. Got a few foods that some people voted for that were should be on the list, but didn't actually make the cut. So we'll kind of talk about what almost made the cut and what's not on the list that some people think should be on the list. And we're going to learn a little bit more than just about some nutrition tonight. We'll learn some stretches and some other things that are going to be helpful to improve our health over the spring, because we're outside, we're going from the winter time to the summertime, and so we want to be a little bit more active and not have to deal with some of the other things that people are dealing with in the springtime, like sore muscles and allergies and things like that. So we'll learn some interesting stuff tonight. First slide that we're going to look at here, you can see there's a cliff here and there's a little guy falling over the cliff. So I've got a little story I'm going to read. This is from John Robbins. Anybody heard of Baskin Robbins, the ice cream place? Mm-hmm. And so John Robbins was the heir to Baskin Robbins, and instead of taking over the ice cream empire, he decided to look into it a little bit more, and he started writing health books. And so this is a story that John Robbins wrote. Once upon a time, there was a large and rich country where people kept falling over a steep cliff. See my example there. They'd fall to the bottom and be injured, sometimes quite seriously, and many of them died. The nation's medical establishment responded to the situation by positioning at the base of the cliff the most sophisticated and expensive ambulance fleet ever developed, which would immediately rush those who had fallen to the modern hospitals that were equipped with the latest technology wizardry. No expense was too great, they said, when the people's health was at stake. Now, it happened to occur to certain people that another possibility would be to erect a fence at the top of the cliff. When they voiced this idea, however, they found themselves ignored. The ambulance drivers were not particularly keen on the idea, nor were the people who manufactured the ambulances, nor those who made their living and enjoyed the prestige in the hospital industry. Medical authorities explained patiently that the problem was far more complex than people realized, that while building a fence might seem like an interesting idea, it was actually far from practical, and that health was too important to be left into the hands of people who were not experts. Leave it to us, they say, for with enough money we will soon be able to genetically engineer people who do not bruise or become injured with these falls. No fences were built, and as time passed, this nation found itself spending ever-increasing amount of financial resources on hospitals, high-tech medical equipment. In fact, it came to spend far more money on medical services than any other nation had ever done in the history of the world. Money that could have gone to community services, decent housing, education, good food was not available for people because it was being spent on ambulances and hospitals. As the costs of treating people kept rising, growing numbers of people could not afford the medical care. There were increasing numbers of homeless, ever more hungry people, and families torn apart by the stress. As a result of these and similar misallocations of national energy and resources, violence, gangs, and inner-city riots welled up as outlets for the frustration and despair people felt. The more people kept falling from the cliff, the more a sense of urgency and tension developed, and the more the country's money was poured into these heroic search for a drug that could be given to those who had fallen to cure their injuries. When some of the people pointed out how fruitless the search had been thus far, and questioned whether a cure would ever be found, the research industry answered with massive public relations campaigns showing men in white coats holding the broken bodies of children who had fallen, pleading, "Don't quit on us now, we're almost there." When a few families who had lost loved ones tried to erect warning signs at the top of the cliff, they were arrested for trespassing. When some of the more enlightened physicians began to say that the medical authorities should publicly warn people that falling off cliffs were dangerous, representatives from powerful industries denounced them as health police. A fierce battle ensued, and finally, after many compromises, the medical establishment did issue a warning. Anyone, they said, who had already broken both arms and both legs in previous falls should exercise utmost caution when falling. Of course, this is just a fable. So it's kind of interesting because he wrote this many years ago, and we kind of look at where our country's at right now and what's happening with spending the money and where the money is going and how much money we're spending. We find that we are spending quite a bit of money, and so in this example, the solution was putting up a little wall at the top of the cliff so people didn't fall off. And if we think about it, in our body, our immune system is our wall of defense to make sure that we don't fall off the cliff and end up in these situations. So we're looking at what are we going to do to build up our immune system, to build our body stronger, so we don't have to be one of those people that falls off the cliff and needs to end up in that emergency situation. So a lot of these foods that we're going to talk about tonight are designed to specifically do that, to build up our wall of defense so that we're not going to be dealing with a lot of these same problems. So the goals for tonight, we're going to talk about what the 6 superfoods are and what else we can do this spring to improve our health. When we talk about these superfoods, there's some terms. I wrote them on the board over here. You're going to see them on your handouts. And so we're going to talk about those real quick because these are going to be common with a lot of these superfoods that we're talking about. The first one is pH balance. Anybody ever heard of pH in the body or pH balance? And so what pH balance is in the body, you have it's either acid or base. Everybody's heard of acid or base. And when you eat things that are like sugary, it's very acidic. And the goal of the body is to be at a base level, a homeostasis level. And so we get too acidic or too basic, we have to change the functions of our body to try to alter the chemistry in our blood. So when we're eating foods, when we're putting things into our body is constantly trying to maintain this pH balance. So if it gets out of balance, it has to release chemicals like calcium or magnesium or potassium to level off that pH balance in the body. So one of the things that some of these foods do is they balance out the pH so we don't have to draw minerals out of our bones or out of our blood or out of our organs to balance the bloodstream. So if our blood gets too acidic, anybody have any idea what might happen?
Diabetics.
Diabetic would be one thing. Do you think a bacteria would rather feed on sugar in an acidic level or more at a neutral level? What do you think would happen? Which one do you think is better? Neutral is where we want. When our blood gets too acidic, that's where the bacteria and the viruses come in. How about cancer? What do you guys think cancer? Do you think it matters what our pH is with cancer, or do you think that cancer only exists in a certain pH level? Yeah, cancer is only existing at a certain pH level. When our blood is at a certain level, you don't get cancer, you don't see any cancer. When that blood gets too acidic, the body gets too acidic, you see levels of cancer raise quite a bit. So when we're talking about balancing pH, it's more than just you don't hurt. It means that you don't get cancer, you don't get sick. There's a lot of major benefits to it. How about arthritis? Do you think it matters with arthritis if our blood is acidic or if it's balanced? It matters a huge amount, because what happens with arthritis is when we look at pH balance in the body, if our body is acidic, we pull calcium out of the bones to balance the pH levels in the body. When you start losing calcium, it makes it a lot easier for those bones to become eroded. So when we look at arthritis and where arthritis is developing, it's developing in an acidic condition. So pH balance is important. Soluble fiber is the second thing that we'll talk about. You'll see this on the list. And what soluble fiber is it's food that moves through the system. We can absorb it, and it's going to help pull toxins out of the body. It's going to attach to cholesterol. So when we worry about cholesterol being high, soluble fiber binds to the cholesterol and helps move that through the body. Our body reabsorbs a lot of cholesterol if we don't have the soluble fiber. So if we're worried about our cholesterol levels being high, soluble fiber is one thing that's real important. And we'll learn about which foods have that soluble fiber. Detoxification. How many people think we live in a toxic environment right now? Yeah. So if you test our water in just the regular in the ground, you're going to find that there's some contaminants in it, in the well water. If you test the air, you're going to find that there's some pollution in it. In fact, if you watch the news, you'll see even sometimes that the air is so polluted in certain parts of Minneapolis, they have warnings out now that says if you have a health condition, you shouldn't be going outside in the city today because the air is so polluted. So what can we do about these toxins? Well, one of the things we can eat is foods that are going to detoxify our body. And so we're going to learn about what some of those foods are. Because there are foods that you can put in your body, and so even if you are being exposed to some of these chemicals, whether you're drinking them, swallowing them, breathing them, there's certain foods that will help detoxify our body. Prevents neurodegeneration. Anybody know what neurodegeneration is? Any idea what one of those diseases might be? Neurodegeneration. Alzheimer's, yeah.
MS.
MS. Yep. Dementia, loss of memory. So huge issue in today's society. Do you think that neuro